on. Okay, so I'll say it again. I'm Christina Crowder. I'm ostensibly the project director for the Klezmer Archive project. This project is supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities in a DHAG Digital Humanities Advancement Grant for 2021 to 22. So we're very thankful for that. And this meeting is a community update on our project and the progress that we've made over the last 18 months. And as we are galloping towards the end of our first 2-year period in this project. So I'm Christina, and
I'm Clara Byan.
I'm Eleanor Bizinski.
I'm Skylar Versteeg.
I'm Max Rothman.
I'm Daniel Kundathagar.
And I'm Matthew Stein.
And not with us today is Jonathan Malin, who is at University of Colorado at Boulder. So with that introduction and welcome, I'm going to turn it over to Dan, who has some news. Is there anything? Actually, did I miss anything?
No, you got it. You didn't make Daniel.
I didn't make Dan Karkner a co-host. Thank you. Please hold.
Okay.
Okay, great. Over to Dan.
The announcement is we have a blog. It's at blog.klezmerarchive.org. And you can find more information there about stuff we've been working on, and we'll be coming out with more blog posts soon.
Yeah, and probably over the course of the next month, there will be a lot of blog posts coming out that are going to be sort of a follow-up, an extension of some of the things that we're going to touch on today. Okay.
That'll be the place to stay most up to date with what's happening, as well as social media, where I will diligently post that we have a new blog post. So all those places, newsletter as well.
Okay, so next up is Skylar Versteeg, who's gonna tell us some things.
Yeah, I'm going to give just a quick update from the user experience or UX land. Essentially, UX, for those of you who have learned a bit about the project, has kind of informed this project in a variety of
Could you turn up your volume a little? It's pretty low. We can't hear you so well. Yeah.
All right. Can you all hear me better? Just try to.
Go ahead, speak loud, lots of consonants.
Okay.
I'm also turning you up. Okay.
All right. Is that at all better? Okay, cool. So just quick update, massive overview from UX land. There'll be absolutely blog posts about whatever I'll be talking about in the future. But UX has informed this project in a variety of ways, including deep conversations with community members to learn about how people think through music, so that way our product can reflect that better. And also at our previous retreat last October, we all worked together as a group to create several journey maps that were meant to enable us to capture user needs in the resource that we are creating. A journey map, in short, is a way of visualizing a user's journey through a situation, a problem, or a product, and it kind of works to capture emotions or questions or problems that people are trying to solve. So these journeys were in part informed by just our knowledge of our community, and also by the experiences and paths that we've heard about in interviews that we've conducted and have been conducting over the past year. And they allow us to imagine the ways that the Klezmer Archive can kind of naturally fit into the lives of our users as they move through their Klezmer lives, which will bleed into things like what features we want to develop or how people might be introduced to us as a resource. So again, definitely we'll go more into depth on this on a blog post, as this subject could fill quite a bit of time, but an example of this might be a journey of a student who had 2 weeks to write a paper about klezmer music, going through the process of searching for klezmer on Google, finding us as their primary resource, and then finding a list of articles and books and scholars to give direction for their continued research. So that being their intro to the world of klezmer. This is not meant to be exhaustive or representative of everyone's experience, but the more we engage with this kind of experience of thinking through how users might work with something like the Klezmer Archive, the more we can reflect the needs of those users and the features and the form and the promotion of this resource. And so in this way, it's kind of similar to interviews that we've conducted. but considers the Klezmer Archive on more of a holistic level. So yeah, that's my quick update from UX land. Definitely stay tuned for blog posts about this and also the mental model interviews as analysis of those takes place.
Okay. Matthew, are you okay? Okay. Hello. Matthew Stein is going to talk to us about a concept that we call the fuzzy Toon boundary. And he stepped out of the room, but here he is. So I'm turning it over to you.
Hello, everyone.
Yep. Are you in frame?
I am in frame, yes. So, for those of you who have been following the blog already, you may have seen a blog post that went up, what was that, yesterday, 2 days ago, about the fuzzy Toon boundaries problem, which I'll be speaking a little bit to now as well. Basically, this is one of many discussions that our team has been having, translating between sort of the human descriptive realm and the computational realm, how we translate how we as musicians or academics would describe something and how we actually translate that and sort of build up those concepts through a computational lens. So one of these fundamental ideas is around what is a tune in Klezmer, which we can play some notes, play a piece of music, and that's an instance of the tune, that's an expression of that tune, but that's not necessarily the tune overall. And when we're just operating as humans generally, we don't necessarily need precise language around this, but when we're actually figuring out how to describe a schema for our knowledge graph, we do need to sort of dive deeper into these concepts. So we've sort of broken this down into a few levels. At the lowest level, we have what we've been calling either a Toon artifact or a Toon expression. This is what I was saying before. It's something that is an instance of that tune. It's a recording, it's a transcription, it's even a piece of writing about the tune. It's some specific thing that we have that relates to that tune. It's not the tune in the broad sense, but it's something that is an expression of that tune. We're being intentional about not equating those things, not saying this transcription is that tune. If we have only one transcription of a tune, that still doesn't mean that it is that tune. It's still just one expression of that tune. But then when we relate all of these together, we have this concept of a Toon family, which is sort of the connected sum of all of these Toon artifacts, all of these Toon expressions. And the Toon family ties into what we're calling sort of the Toon concept, which is this core idea of the tune, which isn't any one expression. It also is an abstract idea rather than one of these concrete inputs to our system. What's useful about this way of thinking about things is it allows the data to be more human and be more descriptive. It allows us to not prescribe that the data must be structured in this one specific way, but rather allows for a flexible, descriptive network approach for how all of our data interacts with itself. And when we run into interesting cases that are the domain-specific exciting parts of the data, where we have two tunes that share the same section, or one tune concept that has migrated through different regions, and we maybe have very similar, almost identical notes, but recordings that are completely different expressions of that tune, it allows us to capture that nuance of the data in a much more descriptive and meaningful way. And as we are going in this knowledge graph direction, that's one of the greatest strengths that we have of being more descriptive and allowing these connections to emerge both naturally and as people interact with the data. So this is an ongoing discussion in our group, but that's sort of a broad overview of where we've gotten largely so far, and we'll have some more blog posts on that on the Toon concept idea soon as well.
Okay. So that leads us into the next discussion, which I'm going to handle, which is this idea. So if you have this idea that Beethoven's Fifth Symphony was composed by a fellow named Beethoven, and there's a singular composer of a named work that has specific components of it. When we think about klezmer tunes, as Matthew has described, we're thinking about a very different concept. We have many tunes that have multiple different versions multiple different expressions, but they share a very similar, a recognizably similar melodic content. And so how do we describe those? Using archival tools. And that process is called, is building an ontology. An ontology is a way of describing all of the things that we want to create data about or record data about a particular melody or a particular artifact. And so that's a topic that our sort of library and archive subgroup has been occupied with very deeply for the last 18 months. And, we're not the first to the post on this. There are many ontologies, many ways of organizing data already exist, right? Library and archive spaces are filled with different ways of understanding and organizing data. If you're a librarian, you will know about the MARC catalog system. There is the Dublin Core for music description. And there are many others. Those are just some examples. And we had a great good fortune to get introduced to an ontology project called Doremus, which is doing reusable music, which was a wonderful French project to connect 3 major French institutions. And so we've been very inspired by this project as a way to provide a foundation for our way of describing music of oral tradition. So the Doremus was primarily concerned with classical music, popular music, jazz, kind of 20th century recorded music, and classical works. And so it's very rich in describing those topics. What it is not good at yet is describing tunes with fuzzy tune boundaries and without known composers, right? Where we have a tune family as opposed to a singular instance of a named and composed piece. So our work has been and is ongoing is expanding the ontology, this list of definitions, to include what we call music of oral tradition. And so I'm going to turn over. We're going to talk about that more in a minute, but before we get there, I want to hand over to Eleanor, who's going to talk about more things that are in the archival and library descriptive space.
Hi. So part of the things that we are looking at and studying are some content standards for archival description. The DAX is describing archives a content standard. It's a standard that was adopted by the Society of American Archivists in 2005 and then revised in 2013. So we're looking at this, and it's like states a few main principles and for how to describe archives, and also gives guidelines for how to fill the certain fields and how to do that in a way that is consistent and user-driven, and all of the things that we're concerned with. It's used to create finding aids and catalog records, and it is not dependent on any format specifically. So the other thing that we're looking at is how to go from one format or schema to another, and that is like remapping metadata and how different fields can to compare like fields that we may need in one standard with the other, basically. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's good. I want to add a couple of things that we may have kind of passed over. What do you need to do?
I'm just there's requests in the chat that I'm going to simultaneously take care of.
Okay, great. So, we should be mentioning that we're building a new thing, right? A novel combination of tools that will help us organize information about klezmer music, and that will be available for other similar kinds of projects that are handling music of oral tradition and other similar topics. We're building it for us, but it will be available for other similar kinds of cultural groups and collections. but while we're aware of, we understand that we need to be aware of and accepting of mark descriptive. We need to be aware of mark as a descriptive tool. We need to be aware of DAX as a useful and helpful way of describing archival sources. And so we need to be aware of and accommodate these systems. And we want to be additive of the very specific, domain-specific things that we are also interested in. And sort of that's the intersection that we're surfing, is how can we be transparent and open to other kinds of systems while building and adding the things that we want to make the functionalities that we desire. And so we're going to talk about linked open data? No, what?
I think we should maybe talk about what exactly we're holding.
Oh.
To make it clear that we are
a digital archive? Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Actually, this is a basic point, but that our archive, the Klezmer Archive, is not a physical space. It's not intended anytime soon to be a physical location, but it is a virtual space and a virtual tool that can hold representations of objects and items and musical items, right? And that will have the ability to connect to other spaces that do hold physical objects. For example, the Mayrent collection at the University of Wisconsin is a beautiful, yes, I see the hands clapping in the room, and we are clapping too. It is a location that holds physical objects and representations of those objects, including images and sound files and catalog information. And one of our dreams for the future is that we would be able to reach, the Klezmer Archive would be able to reach out and connect with those items and provide additive layers of context, metadata that is very genre specific to Klezmer, to help enhance the searchability and findability of that music by genre and typologies that are very specific to our understanding of Klezmer, right? Because oftentimes the name doesn't get you the information that you might want. If you're looking for a chusserl or a Bulgar, those words may not be in the title. And so if you can't search for it, you can't find it. And so that's kind of one of the use cases for this tool, right? And so I should just state simply that we are moving beyond the space of what do you call it, relational database?
Or traditional library archive system.
Yeah, we're moving beyond these traditional library and archive systems and thinking about linked open data and even beyond in our data structures. And there are other folks who are going to talk about those specific technical things. But I'm going to go back, and I think the next thing, am I next on MLA? Networker. Okay, back to Eleanor. Beep. This is our auto zoom. High-tech auto zoom.
So very quickly. So we, in order to conceptualize these ideas, we've been using a tool called the Networker that is a product of Infoloom. It was created actually by my father, Michel Biesunski, and which is basically the equivalent of a word processor for linked data. So it allows to create relationships between topics and even turn these relationships into their own topics and build on that. It helps us sort of go beyond sort of a traditional conception of metadata and make the metadata be the data itself, in fact, and build on that. So I think that's basically it. We're using this as a tool to think about the material, but Christina will show you more about this.
Yeah, so it's been a great. We're very fortunate that we have Eleanor on our team, and that her father has very graciously given us access to a tool that isn't really available off the shelf, right? And so it's been tremendously helpful to us. And so in order to think about that, I want to show you some slides, because that's always fun. Okay, hold on one second. because a picture is worth 1,000 words. Okay, so I'm just going to run through these very, very quickly to get to the part. And these slides will be made available offline. And the slides that we're showing here are a very small subsection of a presentation we made to the Music Librarians Association conference this year. And we are going to do a standalone presentation of only these slides and that presentation for anybody who's interested, because we had a lot of fun making it, and it requires a little bit more time to explain the whole presentation. But all that to say that if you're missing something as I skip through these, don't worry, we're going to come back to them and we'll make the whole presentation available. So we've been doing experiments, right? We've been using the networker to make experiments. And for this, the Music Library Association, we wanted to do an experiment of documenting a Facebook thread, right? How do you capture the kinds of discussions that happen in our klezmer spaces that are so rich with knowledge and that they're really rich with musical examples? And so that was my job for this presentation, was to use the networker to try to document the music and the connections and the relationships that we found on one particularly juicy Facebook thread. And as you can see here, our friend Elias Neves has written a comment somewhere saying, like, wouldn't it be nice? I wish there was some way that we could keep all this stuff. And I think that's a very familiar idea. So this is that's what the thread looks like. You can see there's YouTube links, there's lots of comments. And so then here is what networker looks like. This is the big picture view. And I only show it to not that you can see any of the individual words, but that you can see that there are all these connections between all of these things, and untangling. And so here is a representation of that thread in a way sort of broken down into segments that have conversation, that have video links and so on. And so I'm just sort of showing you very quickly the process of putting this together. And then the next thing I did is I identified the musical items that were mentioned in the thread. And this is a sort of a timeline of the musical mentions on that thread. And then here's even another part of it, because if we're really trying to document what we see, we're not only documenting the idea of, for example, the Crimean Sketches, Opus 9, Part 4, we also have, we're trying to look at, the expression is on YouTube. There's a video representation that comes from a CD from a performance of a symphonic work. And so all of those 5 things are available to be documented in different ways, right? In order to make a really complete representation of what is that thing we're talking about. So this is me trying to break down about all of these different things, that some of them are on YouTube, some of them are on 78 gramophone records, and so like that. And we can now see that even in one tune, there's a lot of inputs and outputs. And then the final conclusion is that I was able to sort of show relationships of parts used in this sort of modular tune. And and this was all sort of done through the medium of the networker, to help me basically understand how you have to separate out different ideas and then that have to do with an item, particularly in this virtual space, and how you conceptualize of those things and how you can attach data and metadata to all of those ideas. And so that's a very, 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 very brief overview. But I'm handing over to Clara, who did another experiment.
My task in preparation for this presentation, I've had the honor of working with the Michael Alpert Field Recording Collection and digitizing and working on cataloging with him of that. And one of the things that we want to document in the Klezmer Archive is the way that tunes and cultural information are shared between people, following the path through humans and locations and all of that. And so Michael Alpert, as a singer and instrumentalist, is the perfect example of sharing cultural knowledge and acquiring cultural knowledge throughout his career. And so I set out to document working with just a couple of the field recordings, and then particularly one of Bronja's songs. So the thing that we want to do differently is, in a traditional system, these people can be connected to items or events or whatever, but and they could both be connected there. Both Bronja and Michael can be connected to an item. But what that doesn't do is describe their relationship in any way that's meaningful. Did Michael learn it at a camp from her? Just happened to be in a session, a workshop that she was leading, or did he spend hours and hours in the kitchen with Bronja? And we know it's the latter, but how do we represent that in the graph? So here we see a view of the networker with an event of the field recording. Here, field recordings are a whole different animal for documenting also. It's very different than documenting a record, a track on a record. There are segments within this one massive recording. How do we note that there's conversations, there's song, there's, the telephone rings, and then is this conversation that's happening over there important? All of these things, there are ways to document that, but we have to create the ontology that lets us do that and standardizes those systems. So more on that later. This is just demonstrating variance, like we talked about. Within the Alpert collection, we have two different versions of this song, and so it just very quickly gets complicated.
Right, but if you have, it is even on the one, is it like one field recording tape had two different versions of the same song?
I think it was a front and back, had two different versions. And we know that those are different than the one that's become more standardized. So, yeah.
Using the idea of a song concept is a way of like making sure that those three things stay closely and tightly linked to each other in a way that isn't always obvious in other systems. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And here is, another example of a song that is obviously very prevalent in our community, Diese Poschkolach, and knowing where someone learned this tune, we can start to track that. But most importantly, here in the middle, this is what I developed in this process, the human relationship concept. So we can connect humans by a label for their relationship. In this instance, mentorship concept, which we then can annotate and give more information on. But what we can do is connect that to anywhere where that transmission happened. The events, the expressions that are a result of that. And we start to get a better sense of the way tunes and cultural information travel between people. And so there could be many different human relationship concepts, and there will be. It could be teacher and student, mentor, mentee, bandmate, yes. There are plenty of options, and we haven't even begun actually to develop that list in particular, but there's plenty of room for standardizing and creating something that works for our space. And so here's just another view of Bronja and Michael's connections.
Okay. And so
it keeps going. It keeps getting bigger. This is,
Right, but this slide was in particular was good because I think it put Bronja and Michael closer together. Like if you see that Michael is here and his big web of connections, and you see that Bronja is here, that somehow in the way that the graph is sort of giving us this visual representation, which is it's an approximation of a number of different things. But what we see down here is that relationship concept is very tightly linked between Michael and Bronja in this very clunky, sort of kludgy visual view. But by creating that relationship and putting it there, it becomes more prominent in our view. And that's one of the things that we're thinking is quite important for us to be able to do. Okay.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, so that's for the end. Okay, that's it. So
So these are
One tiny point. On that last graph, don't you want to put Michael and Bronya in red, or make?
we
Oh.
don't have that kind of
I
control.
mean, it's so confusing. You should have. Seems like there should be some color-coded snap.
yeah, no, I totally hear you,
Yes.
Mark. This, like, when we say that we're using Networker as a tool,
Right.
it really is like there's nothing here that will ever be visible. Like
This is for exploration, and we only
Right,
have
right.
certain.
Yeah, it just
controls.
struck me.
yeah,
I
yeah.
have a more philosophical question. You just used the word version, but then you also have the word variant up there. Is there, and speaking of Matthew's fuzzy concept, is there somewhere where you really, that I think is extremely important. So you can talk about the expression of something and its realization, but that is really different than something being a variant of something. So when do you lay out the philosophy or the terminology and the sensibility that people need to have, that it's not just, here's a tune, here's 3 variants, that's it, forget it, guys, we've got it here. That there is a much more complexity. We don't know when to call something a version of something or something a variant of something. When do you talk about that?
That is something that we're deeply in the process of developing, and that will be a big topic of concern in the last 6 months of this granting period, and it will continue forward into what we hope is our next granting period, because you've really hit the nose on the head that is an essential philosophical concept, and but we have to be able to relate it into machine readable ways to connect stuff
But
together.
that's kind of that nice tension between machines and the fuzziness of the human categorization systems. That
Correct.
It's really important, I think, not only for you to work out technically, but for you to develop as, in a sense, one of the big payoffs of a project like this is to
Correct.
advance things from normal pigeonholing into a much more complex understanding, particularly for Jewish music.
Right, but not exclusively for Jewish music.
No,
But if we can
no.
write about it
It can
here.
be for Hungarian music, but there's ways Jewish music gets a little farther along. A little more
Jewish music is
complicated.
pretty fuzzy in a lot of ways, and it's you have a transnational you have a transnational multi-generational transnational international community like that.
It's much more
That's
complex.
yeah, absolutely.
And I think that would be really important for Jewish studies to be exemplary about that through the very specific question of a bunch of notes that we call a tune.
Yes, and as we start to formalize these ideas, they'll be coming out in blog posts, they'll be coming out in demo projects. We'll be working on this ontology, so you will be hearing more about this, and we're going to be actively soliciting your feedback about these ideas, so that we're really building out things that resemble the way we think about this music, and push the boundaries of how we can record connections and similarities and draw distinctions and differences in a meaningful ways. So thank you for that, Mark. I'm turning it over now to our friend Max, who is going to tell us about the next thing, which is it's like really the next level of all of this. Okay, let me get rid of this. Let's do the auto zoom. Wait, there's auto zoom.
There we go.
Auto zoom. There's
Okay.
auto zoom.
Oh,
Max.
nobody can see my face because I'm backlit though. Here, I'm gonna come over this way a little bit. Okay, so when we're looking for technology to support our lofty aims, it's pretty clear that we're already talking beyond traditional MARC-based or relational database systems. But we're actually looking beyond even linked open data and RDF. So the sort of the state of the art in the humanities there. We're actually we're working with tools that called, if you're familiar with the field, knowledge engines or knowledge networks or first order logic systems, which are fairly well used in industry at large companies for pharmaceutical development or for logistics optimization, that expand on the capabilities of the knowledge networks that are used, or the linked data networks that are used in the humanities, in a few ways that give us some superpowers, let us do things that other things couldn't do. So, for example, one of them is that these systems understand knowledge in a way that's not just like a big bag of things. In a traditional database, even like a linked open data system, you put information in and then you do a query and it says, I've got those, or I don't. That's all you get. I got it or I don't. These systems often have what's called inference, or which means that you can teach the system more things about how the different facts interact. So we could add, instead of saying, like, what events in Beregovsky's life happened in 1903, we can instead say, where was Beregovsky in 1903? And then we have events that say, well, we know he was here in 1908 and here in 1901. So one of those two, maybe, we don't know. Like it helps you bring in the context of the question, so it can understand the relationships between facts and generate novel findings for based on a question that you ask it. Another one is that in these traditional systems, you have your entities and you relate them together, but you can't talk about the relationships themselves. So that's probably fine if you're Wikidata and you want to represent the date of President Lincoln's birth. Like, that's an uncontroversial fact. But we're working in the humanities, we're working in history, and we have to cite our facts. So when these systems also allow you to not just connect your entities together with relationships, but to connect with the relationships themselves. And we can use that to, for example, say how we know that Beregovsky was here in 1903. And here's the document, and here's the region of the document that says it. Here's the words that say it, and here's who collected it. And that becomes a rich part of the knowledge network itself. I'm sorry, just checking my notes here. The last thing that these do is they, in general, they contain tools that allow you to model human concepts in ways that are more natural to the way we would talk about them. So, for example, in a traditional knowledge network system, a fact that has that is more complicated than subject, verb, object. It's kind of hard to represent. So, I could say Max collected this tune. I collected the tune. But what if I wanted to say that Clara gave the tune to me? You can't put that in a subject, verb, object thing. So these tools have ways of representing these things that take us beyond the capability of traditional linked open data systems. And we're investigating how they can contribute to our project, and we're designing our ontology with them in mind. That said, these systems are compatible with, we can make them compatible with MARC, we can make them compatible with REF and linked open data. So we're sort of like bringing things into this new area, but we're also not leaving behind these traditional systems.
Right. And then we'll be adding to the open source tooling and availability in this knowledge engine space.
As far as we're aware, we are the first humanities project to ever consider the use or investigate the use of these tools in the humanities. So we're hoping to sort of pave new ground and bring these tools into this space.
Great. I think I'm next for a brief moment of, we also have this project called KMDMP, Kisselhoff Makonovetsky Digital Manuscript Project, which a few power users, power contributors are in attendance here. And we've been using that corpus as our case study, our testing grounds for a number of things dealing with music information retrieval. And so if you've been contributing to that project, you're already contributing to the Klezmer Archive, and thank you.
Totally.
So,
do you want to just
Max music
I
search?
think it's to Max.
Do you have comments? The answer, or are we good?
You want to say who those people are?
Oh,
Since they're in the room.
well, I mean,
I guess they're all here. You know
yeah,
who they
there's
are.
lots of people.
Yeah.
We know who we are. And I think I don't think we have questions at the moment.
Great.
Okay. So
that
back over
are
to Max.
needed
All
at
right.
this moment. Okay.
So this is just to let you know, soon there will be blog posts and eventually a demo and then eventually a not demo of an application we're working on that allows you to search through the transcribed corpus of KMDMP tunes using the music itself. So you can type some notes into web interface, and it'll give you back, here are all the tunes that match that. And it's not, you don't have to type it exactly, like you're allowed to get a note wrong here or there. The system understands that these things are similar to each other. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
But we already did it once. There was a demo.
We did show it once. We showed an early prototype. A live version is coming soon.
Right.
Dan?
So another thing related to the KMDMP project that we want to talk about, or relevant, is we want to adopt something called TripleIF, which is the International Image Interoperability Framework. And so with the KMDMP project, we have these high quality scans of the manuscripts, the hefts that are stored in the Vernadsky library. And right now we have them in PDFs in Google Drive, and people are referencing those. But we're going to want to include those images in any tool that we build, and we also want to make it easier to work with them. And so, and not just those images as a whole, but also particular regions or modified versions or resized versions at different quality levels in different file formats. And so TripleIF is something that allows us to do that. And so basically we can load all of the images online, like we can upload them onto a server and have a TripleIF compliant image server sitting in front of them. And then basically every heft image will have a URL, and you can, within that URL, say, I want this particular region and I want it in grayscale. And so it gives you a lot of tools to manipulate that. It also means that you can share those URLs with other people, and we can create tools that make it really easy to incorporate the images or parts of images and modified sections of images in our application, and also share them with each other if we want to speak to and then also we can curate particular views, and so you can navigate through a sequence of images that we've curated for you. And so that's a really exciting project. There are good open source tools, and so it's just doing what we need to do to clean up the data, to get stuff deployed, and then share those images more easily.
So since we do have a lot of Kisselhoff people in the room, this is, for example, in the translation wish list. This would allow you to go to the place in the heft and take your text or your item that you want to have translated and select it, and then create a permanent URL for that region, and then put it into the translation wish list. It's a much more easy process than just the screenshotting thing. And another thing that can happen is, for example, in Makanevetsky, where there's all those little text bits that are being entered into the heft tracking sheets, those can also now have a URL directly to that section of the text. You know, it's sort of infinite. Well, maybe not infinite, but there are just a lot of really, really cool ways that this stuff can be used. And we got a demo of it this morning from Dan, and we're all really excited. So that's coming up really soon. Well, you know, it's coming up probably by the end of the year. We can think that that's like kind of a horizon for this new tooling. Tismir. Do we want to talk about Tismir really briefly?
We can?
We can?
Go
Yeah,
for it.
I don't know. We wrote another thing that our project team has been engaged with is a little bit peripheral, but we wrote, there was a co-authoring process of a paper for the transactions in Music Information Retrieval journal. We've submitted it. We don't know if it got accepted yet, but it was a co-writing process between myself, Clara, Jonathan, and Daniel Shanahan from Ohio State University in Columbus. And that was really about sort of looking at the Kisselhoff project and the crowdsourcing components of it, and sort of identifying ways like we were thinking about how we can how to make the music information retrieval community sort of aware of communities of music makers. Like our tool that we're trying to build for the archive is designed, it's designed for archivists and librarians, and it's designed for educators and researchers, but it's also our primary core user group are musicians and music makers. So this process of writing was to really like hone in on what are the sort of specific things that we need to do in order to keep that audience front in mind as we're building our tools. So one way or another, that paper is going to be available to, on our site or in a blog post sometime soon. And we'll hopefully find out about that within the next couple of weeks. So look for that. And then now we're going to gallop to our conclusions.
Yeah, and look at us being right on time.
Oh my gosh.
So one of my jobs as development director for the Klezmer Institute is to do the grant writing to try to support this project, among others. And so one of the main things we want to point out during this talk is that, yes, we are serving our community, but we're serving the community, the humanities community broadly. And so I just want to read this small chunk of things that kind of summarizes, because we wrote it, so why not? The Klezmer Archive tool has the potential to solve problems more broadly found in the organization of information about orally transmitted folklore and in the documentation of transnational cultures. Integrating musical search and analytical tools has the potential to make a corpus of non-classical Western music available to a wide audience of researchers in musicology, corpus studies, and ethnomusicology. Deploying the power of knowledge engine technology together with robust domain-specific ontologies will allow culture bearers and archivists to work together to tell the story of communities, arts, and cultures in a more comprehensive way than has been previously possible. And so this doesn't just apply to us in music, it applies to folklore spaces, it applies to any space where knowledge, cultural knowledge is transferred through humans, as it is. And so, at this point, I invite you to think of people you know who deal in realms outside of Klezmer, other musics, folklore, language, and tell them about the project, because we also want to serve them. And if we bring them into our realm now, then we can also meet their needs in different ways. Our Klezmer community is our primary focus, but we are also thinking broadly and want to be influential throughout the humanities space.
Right. And to bring in ideas and expertise on all of the various components that we're touching. I mean, we're touching music information retrieval. We're talking novel data storage and organization tools. We're talking about ontology extension, like extending ontologies and descriptive components into spaces that have not had, to our knowledge, this kind of robust descriptive treatment. And as Mark is also pointing out, that this area of Toon families, fuzzy boundaries of Toon's genre and typology is kind of an exciting space to be in. And so, if you know of people who are working in these spaces and who have maybe ideas or knowledge that can help us be robust in our thinking as we're building these tools, we are all ears for that. I'm going to say that it's 2:56, and this kind of concludes our formal presentation component, and we'd like to open up our floor for discussion and comments and questions, and then we'll end up with just a quick thank you at the end. But
remember, this is a work in progress, right. And so you may ask us questions, and we say we don't know the answer yet. This is a long-term project, but ask away.
Yeah, and the one final thing I'll say is that the outcome of this granting period for us is a white paper that sort of that will be a descriptive of our process, but will be kind of a plan. It will be a descriptive plan for the tool that we're intending to work on in the next granting period. So, okay, I see Sherry. Sherry has her hand up, so go for it. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, you guys continue to blow my mind. The visionary nature of what you're all doing is phenomenal, and I applaud you.
Thank you.
Sure. Has any thought been given to bringing two more areas into this, which is one, getting the tunes that are on the recordings into the searchable mix in all of their variants and magnificence, and the other is what about new compositions, and is there a plan to collect those from people like me who have been churning them out like big time?
So I can answer the when we can successfully import and include and document a Kisselhoff tune, right, from our KMDMP collection, we will have the technology to successfully import a composition of yours or a composition of another person. It may take us. We may not be doing that actively for some undetermined at this moment period of time that I'm not going to make promises about. But that is certainly, of course, and for sure, and absolutely, because we're not documenting. We don't want to be, this is a document. It is a collection space for a living community and a living culture. So it's not like there's a cutoff point where you say it's only things that are before today. This has to be open for the future and, extensible for the future. We want to be having, that this is a living cultural thing. And it's the only way that a project like this can survive, actually, and not become obsolete or out of date and abandoned, is that it has to be serving a moving and living community. And so that's our goal. And now for the recorded sound, the short answer is yes. When that happens, it will happen at some time. And it's on our radar, but we're not, at the moment, we have kind of a lot of things to sort of bolt together to make that core framework. And if we can make it work as a core framework with our Kisselhoff test corpus, then now adding in other media and ways of searching in media will be possible. Music search on recorded sound is a thing that exists,
Also, I think you could consider crowdsourcing, not transcriptions exactly, but I guess transcriptions without all of the ornamentation, because a lot of people have done a lot of that for a lot of tunes and could make them available in the same way that you've crowdsourced the Kisselhoff stuff.
Right. Well, and also there are many tune books and collections, between the complete Klezmer and the Kostakowski, and Berogowski has already been digitized. So like that's something that we can be incorporating. And so yes, those things are definitely on our radar. And if I can say that here's a recording of Turk in America that's got an exemplar at the Mayrant Institution, it's also at FAU. And here's also a transcription, a basic transcription of this tune that's in this tune book. Then now we can be grouping all of those things together as of exemplars of that tune. And now it is searchable. Now, when we get to the variant and the very specific things, that's going to be a longer project. But yes, the thing that you described for sure. But Eleanor, you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that this is partly why we look at crosswalking and ways to be able to incorporate different formats of cataloging so that we can connect to other collections, at least at the metadata level, and then deeper even into the digital files if they exist,
Right. But for example, the Mayrant collection, you have permalinks on each of those entry has a permalink, and each of those, it's quite transparent how you connect to those image files. It's quite transparent how you interact with those sound files. But yes, that is a conversation that's a little bit down the road for us, but we're definitely thinking about it.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have a question? Or Max, you look like you have something to say. No. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anybody else want to weigh in on that? Okay.
We're just going to scan through the chat really quickly and see if there's...
Yeah, and if you have a thing, unmute yourself and ask it. Anyone? New compositions and new juxtapositions. Yes. Yes. All the things that Rosa has said in the chat. Absolutely. Yeah, because
yeah, and things above it, talking about connecting different sources of media together is at the heart of it, and documenting the media and the humans that made those media exist. So
I want to do the Sim Shalom maneuver. Should we talk about that?
Sure, that's a good concrete example.
This is a good concrete example. So what is that tune?
That's a question.
Yeah. Well, there's...
The question for you guys is, who will do the data entry? Very straight ahead.
Well...
us and you and us broadly.
And you and our friends. Yeah. There's always ways to do... I mean, our colleagues here are working and always constantly trying to think about ways to automate and extract, automate and extract so that we can be setting up things where the simple, straightforward, non-controversial things can be automated to the extent that they can be. There's always crosswalking. This is a new word for us from Eleanor, but there's always edge cases and outliers and weird things that don't fit into the pattern. But to the extent that we can develop systems that are consistent about importing and ingesting information, we are going to be doing it, always knowing that there will be a human eye on things at some place and at some level, and necessary for that. But here's an example we talked about this weekend, because is a piece from the Kisselhof, and this is a way of demonstrating something that's one of our superpowers of this team, which is that this team of 9 altogether. Nine-ish people, basically almost all of us and everybody, we're all Klezmorim to some degree. We all are experts in our various subject areas, but we're also musicians, and so we're also deeply concerned with and invested in Klezmer. And so we're our first test audience for a lot of things, right? And that's very helpful, actually. Many teams don't have... their subject matter experts are on sort of the admin side, and then the tech folks maybe don't have that domain expertise. And we're very fortunate that this project really wouldn't exist actually without the domain expertise of the sort of founding project members here. And so to that end, when we go on retreat and we get together, we sit down in the evening and we play music. Because we can, and now we get to, thanks to this project. And so we played a tune. Actually, Sherry, you'll know this tune. It's Kisselhof Mac 1 32117. It's called a Gassenshtickel. And it has a da 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 dum ya da 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 dum ya da 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 dum da 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 dum ya da da dum ya da 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 dum da 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 dum, something like that. So that's the opening phrase. And so we're playing that, and everybody's like, "Oh, what a beautiful tune! How lovely!" And then Dan said, "Sorry, he didn't know he was doing this, but like Dan said."
So. I recognized similar modulation schemes or kind of modal progressions to other tunes, and so.
And specifically, which one was it?
So I was thinking of the one the Berdichever share / Spielte mir Klezmerlach. That's like yai tai ta yai tai ta yai tai ta yai tai tam ya da 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 da. But the second part goes. It modulates to major on the 4, ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da, ya da 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 da, ya da 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 ya da 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 da, and then it's in Freygish in the 5th. And so that modal progression is the Sim Shalom maneuver, which is a cantorial maneuver that shows up in all sorts of places. The Freygish on the 1 to Hashem Molech on the 4 to Freygish again on the 5.
And so in art, and so as we realize our tool, as we put this tool together, and we're coming up with ways to take the encoded music. So we have a piece of sheet music, that's been encoded from the manuscripts, and now we're digitally encoding it so that it's available to our search algorithms. We have the potential to tag certain schema, and we could say that this tune has the sim shalom schema in these measures, right? We come up with an arbitrary but identifying name for that we can make up or that we can take from other practices. It doesn't have to have only one name. It just needs to identify that that's what it does. It does a certain kind of modal or chord progression. And we can possibly, tell me if this is true, can we train the computer to look for that?
Yes.
Okay, right? So now we can train, thank you. That was easy, that was cool. See how cool these guys are? So now we can train the computer to search all of the digitally notated music that's been encoded for that pattern, for that schema. And it'll turn up results for us, right? Some of them will be meaningless and they won't make sense, right? That's always gonna happen. But some of those things will be meaningful and will help us surface connections, and that's a connection that Dan was carrying in his head, right? And we're all of us, everybody in this room who's a klezmer aficionado, you have a big collection of those connections in your brain, right? And this tool, when it's realized, is a way to help to share those connections with other people and to sort of put them into this web of knowledge, and you could say, a critique would be, well, doesn't that take away the magic? And we think that actually just adds to the magic by being able to sort of see connections, to allow the computer to do the work, to help us show connections that were not necessarily obvious. So yeah, that's kind of like the super exciting stuff of our project. And Sherry, I see you got another question.
I want to add one.
Yeah.
Before you go, Sherry, sorry to cut you off. Max wants to add a
I
thing.
want to add one thing. We said that we could do this, but we also want to make it so you can do this.
Right.
This whole thing is open. All of the data is open for anyone. Any researcher at any university or not at any university can get our data and ask the same questions. So it's not just for us. It's not just for the people in this room. It's for anyone who has any interest or motivation to explore this music in any way.
Right.
Sherry?
Yeah. So my question was, is your system going to have the ability to recognize the patterns across keys, or are you going to have to somehow transpose everything all into the same key?
We don't have to Berezovsky-ize it. It can be in whatever.
So it'll recognize intervals rather than individual. That's fantastic. Awesome.
Our search, the music search demo that we're already working on, already doesn't care what key that you write your search in. You can write it in A and it'll find tunes in D. You can find it. You could write it in B double flat. It doesn't care.
That's phenomenal. That's great.
You could even you could double all the times. You could, instead of, quarter, eighth, you could do 8/8, 16th. It doesn't care about that either. So there's ways to make these things flexible so that it accounts for like the differences in the ways people approach asking the question. Like they can understand the question and give you what you really mean instead of just being like, I didn't find it.
Will it recognize cross tempo? I mean, not tempo, time signature moves. Like there are certain melodies that you can play as a terkasher, you can play as a chassidol, you can play as a hora or a waltz. Will it recognize across the different time signatures as well?
We haven't investigated that much yet, but the answer is almost definitely we can figure out how to make it do that.
Cool.
Anything in 2/4, anything in 4/4, that's easy peasy.
Right.
4/4 to 3/4, we'll find out. But probably, I'm just going to believe what they say, which is probably, right? I heard somebody have a hand up. Adrian.
Yeah. I'll try to put this succinctly. Way back when, I think many of us, Klezmorim, were very, 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 very focused on only the melodic line and almost ignored the modal pattern or the harmonic structure behind it. And as I've been looking at certain tunes, I'm noticing, it always does this and it always does that, and that must be, regional. And I'm hoping that somehow this gets included so that we also learn what's behind the melody and be knowledgeable more about it. When I compose, there's certain patterns and certain harmonies that appeal to me a lot, and it took me a while to realize that one of Michael Alpert's beautiful Ukrainian songs, I went to look at to listen to other Ukrainian music. I said, oh my God, there's a reason why it goes in that direction, because their music does. I'm looking forward to including that in our discussions and input.
Yeah, do one of you guys want to talk about that sort of modal tagging and stuff like that? I mean, it's a topic we've definitely talked about this. How we do this, we're not 100% sure, but it's something we do think about because we can see by your very question and our own questions that it's something that people are curious about. Now, do you have anything you want to add? Do you have thoughts to add to that?
What I know so far is that there are people in computational musicology who are working on solving those kinds of problems, and we absolutely want to incorporate their work into this tool when we can.
Right.
I don't know the details yet, but it's something that's sort of on our radar, and we'll keep an eye on where the state of the art is moving.
Right. I mean, our colleague who isn't with us today, Yonatan Malin, is a corpus studies expert, and he is a closely associate of a fellow named Dan Shanahan, who is a computational musicologist and corpus studies person at Ohio State in Columbus. And so they bring a lot of expertise in that realm. And in fact, Yonatan is writing a book about a computational analysis of the Berezovsky corpus. So that work and his research will inform how we approach these topics in our tool. So watch this space, I think. And then one thing I will, and if you've got a question, put your hand up in some way so we can use the put your hand up function. I'm going to say something about typologies and genre classification, which is that when we move into this knowledge engine realm or into the realm of network graph technology, we are freeing ourselves from the limitations of, for example, the Library of Congress system of subjects and what do you call those things? Subject tagging and stuff like that, and subject headings. And even from the MARC system, where there might be more subject headings available, but you still have kind of a limited thing. And what we know that we can do and that we're planning to do is to allow for many, many kinds of typologies and genre classifications. And that as people add or create typologies that describe certain useful things that are useful to them, that they can be incorporated into the graph, and that they don't, and that my idea of how I would classify something, or that Berezovsky would classify the things in his corpus as for listening or for dancing, right? And that can be one very simple typology that applies to the Berezovsky corpus. Right? But Zev Feldman might come in and say, oh, this subsection of the corpus, these are core melodies, and these tunes are of a transitional repertoire. And that those typologies don't cancel each other out. They can mutually coexist with each other. And Sherry might come in and she might say, on the same tunes, a slightly different subset, well, these are tunes that have this quality. right? And we're working and looking at models that allow for this sort of multiplicity of genre classifications and multiplicities of typologies that can be defined by anyone who uses this tool for their own purposes, and that these typologies don't have to collapse into a single narrative of right or wrong, right? They can coexist, and that they can disagree with each other in a very in the nicest possible way, right? And I think that's a real feature because if you're looking at tunes that people classify, as Frelux, but other people classify them as a chassidal, and you want to pull together a pool of tunes. I'm making this up as we go. Pull together a pool of tunes that have a classification of Frelux and that have a classification of chassidal, right? That they have both of them. Like, you might be able to learn something about tunes that have both of those tags that makes them different from ones that that only have one or only have the other. Now, you might not be able to learn something useful about that, but you might, right? But it's adding some knowledge, it's just helping us to add things, and the one person who's like, no, that's a Jacques, those outliers also can be interesting, right? So, Sherry, you have another one?
Yeah, what about including tempo information? Because, for example, like I'm thinking of something like the tune which most of us know is a chassidal, but there's at least one recording where I think Dave Terrace plays it faster than the speed of sound. And I'm sure you've got tempo markings from a lot of the archival stuff as well, where they noted, whoever was collecting the tunes noted the tempos at which they were played. And that might be useful information in all of this.
Right. So yeah. But we want to be clear about we have to be clear about what we're saying about a thing. Is this a measurable thing from a 78 recording, that there is a particular tempo? Is it written down allegro on the manuscript? Is it written quarter note equals 132? Like, we have to be, or is it me saying, well, I usually play this in my own performance practice at this tempo, right? And so all of those different things can be accommodated, but we have to be very clear about what is the source of that piece of information, and make sure that we're not saying something that when we're speculating or representing our own experience is one thing, as opposed to a data point that we are taking from a thing. Do you want to say more about that?
Oh, no, that's great. And this is exactly the kind of thing that we can figure out ways to represent with knowledge engines. Right. This is one of the things that the knowledge network technology gives us, is instead of just saying it is a chassidal, we can say Christina says it's a chassidal. Mm-hmm. And we can,
or the title says,
or
it's a
like we ran into a tune this weekend where it says both like tempo
valse.
It says, well, what was the first other thing?
And
allegro.
It says allegro, and then below it says tempo valse. And so the manuscript actually says two different things.
Well, and like, Gosnigan. Right?
And it says Gosnigan. So like, being able to not say, X or Y, but say X and Y and Z, but attributed to these different sources is like part of the superpower of this technology that part of the reason that we're looking to bring it in.
Right. Mm-hmm. You got more on that, Dan?
Oh no, that's great.
Okay.
We have more comments too.
Oh, we have more comments. Elia explained that once tempo valse actually means fast. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yes. Yeah. Waltz can be fast. But we also know from okay, so here's another secret. Okay, here's another cool thing, right? So we also know, okay, fine. I know. So I'm getting all worked up here, but so we also know from Makinevetsky. So we're talking about a specific example in Makinevetsky. This is actually the tune that I sang earlier. Mac 132 117, the Gossen Shtickle. It's a great tune, just FYI. Which is why we're all obsessed with it. But it says there, allegro, and then it says tempo valse. And so that's what we have right there in that adjacent space. But we know from elsewhere in Machiavetsky's manuscript that he says, everybody knows how one should play the waltz. And everybody knows when you should speed up and when you should slow down and when you should pause, right? And, and so he's writing this as if everybody does. And so he says, I'm not going to give you specific instructions for all of these mazurkas, and same thing for the mazurka. So I'm not going to write all this stuff out for you in these tunes because everybody knows how it's supposed to go. Come to find out that 100 years later, not everybody knew this. And we're really glad that Machiavetsky told us this piece of information in his manuscript. But that little nugget of information appears on 100 pages separated from where this little shtickle is. Now, but what we can do is we can now associate that note, that note from Machiavetsky to this item that has a nearness, an adjacency to the vaults, to what he's writing about vaults, so that the person who comes along and finds this item has this extra contextual information that's adjacent to it, right? And so for us, that's really exciting because this is the kind of work that you would put into a critical edition, right? And we certainly will. We most certainly will be putting these into print editions. But allowing these pieces of data and these little contextual nuggets to be closely associated with the relevant pieces of music, I think, is another sort of novel thing that we're going to try to, I don't know how exactly we do that, but it's a thing that we certainly can do. I know I don't have to question whether or not that's possible. So, anybody concerned about manuscripts not yet scanned?
They're talking about Vernadsky.
Oh, Vernadsky, I think Vernadsky is, they're not talking about it. And I think what that means is that that they've taken steps and that they are doing everything they can to protect the collections. And hopefully we'll find out about all of this stuff 10 years from now when everything's fine and back to normal. So anybody else have a question or a comment? We've got a few more minutes and then we'll let you all go back to your afternoon.
Or night.
Or your evening, wherever you are. Anyone?
I have another quick comment, sort of generally in response to things. So when we're talking about will we include time signature, will we include like any of these different features, basically we have a few different layers of thinking about data. So as we are going through the data, sort of automated data ingestion process as well as human editorial process, we're trying to represent both the content and the structure and the relationships of the data as seen, not adding anything onto it, but just the data as is, as accurately, as thoroughly as possible in a sort of lossless format. So we're not, we're trying to break it down into as many subcomponents as possible to be as precise and make it as searchable as possible so that we don't have to go back through and do like a dozen other passes to, we have this one text field that actually is representing 3 different attributes that we can't automatically break down, recognizing that those are different things and then saying those 3 fields, those 3 bits of information are all part of the subtitle, like relating it to maybe where it is graphically on the score, how it's serving functionally, but representing just the data as is. So we're going in with the assumption that any bit of data, any attribute of these artifacts, we're trying to represent as accurately and thoroughly as possible. So if it's there, we'll include it. Then above that, we have this layer of logical inference of once we have all this data, we have ways in which it will sort of automatically connect to each other and reveal new things to us based on just the thoroughness in which we've input the data. So when we have Temple Valse, we know that we can search for that and information related to that in the writings around Machiavetsky, and that will connect back to the places in which that appears. We can do these sort of really precise slice searches and the data will automatically connect. And then for things for which we don't have data, so the power of this is that we're joining across many different data collections, and with that means there's also certain biases within this. So from one collection we might not have any chords for anything, so we don't have as much harmonic information directly presented in the artifacts, but we might have someone who comes along and writes an algorithm that for any sequence of notes can automatically calculate the tune center and come up with its best guess for a chord each measure. And obviously that's going to have a certain bias, like not everyone would harmonize it that way. Or we could go through, and because we'll have the different melodies eventually sequenced across each other, so we have different tune artifacts, and we can say this measure in this one corresponds to this measure or this note in this one. Generally speaking, we can correlate across these things. We could do analysis within a tune family saying all of these have this chord in this place, and we could identify just the chords that are different or that are totally variable across each of them. So we have this layer of like actively calculated information, and that's where we can, some types of that analysis can be things that we choose to integrate into the core knowledge itself. Some of it can just be sort of side projects and fun explorations of what you can do with the data. But we're making sure to keep these layers separate. So even when we do that type of analysis of saying, oh, we have in-depth harmonic information here and none in this other data source, and we're trying to do an analysis across those data sources, we're still maintaining the clarity within the data set itself of, oh, but the Berezovsky doesn't have chords, so we're not making it seem as if it did. So we're able to do this analysis, but we're keeping a persistent awareness of context and where the data comes from, and sort of what everybody's been saying, the context of these relationships.
Right.
But that sort of represents our thinking in this. Anything we have will be included. If we don't have it, we're not going to include it at that level, but we can sort of introduce it as a concept later on as the data structure and formats lends itself to that type of analysis.
Great. All right. Well, I think that's it.
So the things you can do,
Yeah.
include join the Klezmer Institute mailing list, because we will tell you about updates via the mailing list. Bookmark the blog page that we may not tell you every time we post a new blog via the mailing list, so keep an eye on the blog page. That's where the latest information will be. Tell your friends, as I mentioned before. Please tell your friends in the Klezmer community, outside the Klezmer community, anyone who this may be of interest to. And if you know anyone who may want to financially support this project, please let us know. Introduce us. We want to be their friends, and we appreciate that. And on the simplest level, participate in the Kisselhoff project, KMDMP, because that is our case study material. So work done there directly teaches us things for the Klezmer Archive.
Right. And when we're talking about potential funders, we mean also like institutional sources. Like we have our eyes on we're applying constantly to foundations and to all kinds of granting programs. But we don't have, like all-seeing eyes. So if you think of a foundation or if you know of a program that would be interested in this kind of work, then we would be very happy to write an application or get a letter of introduction to whoever's running those foundations.
We have lots of cheering happening in the chat.
Yeah.
We'll save the chat and share it with you.
So I would just like to say thank you to all of you for coming and spending your afternoon with us today. We're excited to be here all together, and we've had a really, really, really productive weekend. So thanks for your support, and we'll look forward to keeping you posted on what's happening with us going forward. And you can unmute yourself, and let's all say hi and goodbye and schmooze a little bit as we head out the door.
Thank you, guys. You're all wonderful, and my heroes, definitely. 30, 40 years ago, I had glimmerings of something similar and just couldn't figure out how to make it happen. And so I ended up focusing on my little bit with the recordings. But the depth and breadth of your vision is stunning, and the fact that it's not just achievable, but as achieved as it already is really remarkable. So bravo to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry.
I'm just curious, How did you all gather in one room?
We got tested.
Well, I wasn't even. Where are you?
We're in. Are we in Surprise? Surprise!
We're in Surprise!
Surprise,
New York. Surprise, New York.
There's a little town called Surprise, New York, and that's where we are.
Seriously? Wow. That's
Quelle
hilarious.
surprise.
Quelle surprise!
Some people came from
Are.
California.
Yes.
Yes.
So the reason we're gathered here is because of the NEH grant. In our digital humanities grant, we had planned 2 in-person meetings. And we had one in October of 2021, just north of the city, at another Airbnb. And this is our second retreat, and we are at another Airbnb. It's the cheapest way for us to get together is to just rent a big house and stay. And so that's what we're doing. And we've spent we got here Wednesday night, and we've just been having work sessions and really working on these thorny kinds of questions, how to resolve them, how to think about them, how to plan as we're going forward, and all of that stuff that you can do in person that is much harder to do over internet channels, you know.
It's amazing the brilliance of all the minds all collected.
Absolutely. And we have a band. What's our band name?
The Archivisten.
I love it.
And you know, it's actually pretty well balanced instruments. I have to say, we are actively recruiting a bass player, but in our band we have.
Hey, Claire, you want to learn to play bass?
Yes, no, she's a clarinet player. Yo, 3 violins.
He doesn't want any clarinets. Max had his way.
No flute, right? No flute.
No flute yet. Jonathan plays flute. Jonathan plays Mali.
That's right. That's true.
3 violins,
Very
flute,
well.
clarinet, cymbal, and accordion.
Wow, perfect.
Got a bass clarinet. That work?
Yeah.
That's true. I got that. Yeah.
Yeah, and clarinet plays bass clarinet too. So, so we're very lucky to be all together and hanging out and doing all this stuff.
Great.
So that's it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you guys. Take care. Stay safe.
All right.